Get it.
You're listening to Boomers Today with your host, Frank Sampson.
Well, welcome to Boomers Today. I'm your host, Frank Sampson. Of course, each week we bring you important and very useful information on issues facing baby boomers, their parents, and other loved ones. And I just can't thank everybody enough. I know I do this each time, but I thank all of you because as you know, we don't do any promotion per se on this show. We have grown organically because of all of our listeners sharing individual podcasts and our entire show with family and friends. And many of you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, many other podcast stations that we're on. Some of you go directly to our website at boomerstodayradio.com. And I just want to thank you all for doing that. And I know why you do, because we have great guests, very knowledgeable. And I'm not going to disappoint you today because we have with us Dr. Cameron Camp. And over 3 decades of dedication he's had to the applied and translational research of gerontology, dementia, intervention, and cognitive intervention. Dr. Camp has earned international renown for his work to improve the quality of life for persons with dementia and memory disorders. The co-holder of 2 patents developed through small business innovative research, Dr. Camp has also been appointed Principal Investigator on numerous NIH-funded projects and served as President of the Adult Development and Aging Division of the American Psychological Association, lecturing and training across Asia, Australia, Europe, and North America on the use of Montessori Dementia Interventions, and with writings that have been translated into 6 other languages. Dr. Camp is a personal force for global change for persons with dementia and memory disorders. So Dr. Camp, it's an honor, absolutely, to have you on our show. Thank you for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, it's great. So a lot to talk about. I know our shows are only about a half hour. I could talk to you for hours, but we'll try to do what we can in our half hour here. But
sure.
But maybe you could just I mentioned the Montessori, which is a very interesting approach. So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about Montessori and the concept of Montessori and the approach that you've used it towards dementia care.
Sure. So Maria Montessori was a physician who specialized in rehabilitative medicine and in pediatrics. She was one of the first female physicians in Italy. So she was also an advocate for women's rights and human rights. She initially began to work with children in a psychiatric hospital that were deemed to be unteachable. And she walked into that environment and said, the problem is the environment. If you change the environment, change the way we approach teaching, perhaps we can get a different result. And so that was the basis of her approach. She looks at the capabilities that people still have rather than their disabilities. We use a rehabilitation approach based on her work in education when we work with persons with dementia. So we ask, 2 very critical questions. What abilities does this person still have? And also, who is this person? Who is this person? So you have to know the individual and match them with their capabilities, and then modify the environment so that they can be successful. The Montessori approach is based on 4 key values: respect, dignity, equality, and this all leads to trust. And so to translate these values into practice, we have a number of key principles. So for example, we give choice. So if you have a person with dementia and you're asking them to decide what to wear today, as dementia progresses, it may be difficult to make a choice if there's a closet full of clothes. But what you can do is hold up 2 blouses and say, which one of these would you like to wear today? And even if they can't speak, they can point. But the feeling that you have when you're given choice, that's a key element to a good quality of life. This is about enabling persons with dementia to do as much for themselves and each other as possible. Montessori said, everything you do for me, you take away from me. Now, what we say is, if you've ever seen a parent that does everything for a child,
Right.
They do it out of love, but the result isn't necessarily a good one for anyone. It's very easy to teach dependence out of love. And so this approach turns everything on its head. This is about empowering persons with dementia, about modifying tasks and environments so that they can succeed. We also emphasize, more than I think most other approaches to dementia care, we emphasize the capacity to recover function and to learn new things. Persons with dementia are learning all the time. We've been trained to look at the deficits. So for example, we say, if you're in an adult day center or in a residential setting that cares for persons with dementia, try this test. Find a chair that a person usually sits in for lunch and put somebody else in there ahead of time and see what happens. And the answer is not pretty.
Right.
They will come in, they'll say, hey, that's my chair. They learned this after the diagnosis and after they moved into a residential setting or started daycare. People with dementia are learning all the time. And our emphasis is, how can we use this? Another example is the ability to read. But it has to be large enough print. You mentioned before that we do translational research. So I'll give you an example. If you read the research on visual changes with dementia, you'll see something like, in Alzheimer's disease and related dementias, the ability to detect high spatial frequency within the visual field is severely compromised. Level of compromise increasing as a function of progress of the disease. So you see why you need translation.
Right.
What that means is thin lines are hard to see.
Yeah.
So you need thick print, you need large print, you need a font that is without the curly cues, what are called serifs. So you use a sans serif font. I like Arial because that's the top choice when I'm scrolling down on my font choices.
Right.
Arial is a good sans serif font. So it needs to be thick. It needs to have high contrast. So you want black on white, white on black. I was at an airport and there was a sign above the moving walkway. It said, please don't put your carts on the walkway. Yellow print on a white billboard. And as people age, often the lens of the eye starts to yellow. And so that billboard may not have been even visible in terms of the print. So for the very people they were kind of targeting to not put on the cart, they designed the environment so that they couldn't use it. So yeah, we look at things like what abilities are in. Can the person still read? We see people who score 0 on mental status exams, but they can still read if the print is large, you have good contrast, if they can see. And so it's a habit. So habits are there. Another principle besides giving choice is to always demonstrate what you want somebody to do. So I tell nursing assistants when we're training them, if you come at me with a razor blade and I have dementia, I'm going to tell you, I'll let you shave me if I can shave your legs. And they look at me, I look at them. So how about if you come in with an electric razor, you show how it works on your skin, you demonstrate, then you hand it to them. Or you come in with 2 toothbrushes, one for them, one for you, 2 things of toothpaste. Another Montessori principle, it's very rehab, occupational therapy. You break things down into steps. You do one step at a time. You go from simple to complex. So you take off your toothpaste cap, point to theirs, they take it off. You put on some toothpaste on the toothbrush, point, they put it on theirs. You smile, they smile, you brush your teeth, they brush their teeth. You can actually see recovery of function if you approach it from a rehabilitation point of view. Again, when we do training, I look at the nurse assistants and say, you're going to be paired into twos. The person on the left is going to brush the teeth of the person on the right. I've got some little toothpastes here. And then the person on the right will brush the teeth of the person on the left. And I say, I'm crazy enough to do this. Mm-hmm. And then they look at me like with this shocked face. The way you feel about somebody else, even though they're nice, caring, professional friend, the way you feel about someone else brushing your teeth is the way a person with dementia feels.
Yeah.
And being able to give that sort of thing back, we say it's a little thing that's a big thing. So giving choice, demonstrating, breaking things down into steps, signage. So, for example, my mother-in-law was staying with us one summer. She had Alzheimer's disease, and her son, my brother-in-law, had brought her for the summer. He was doing an internship at the Cleveland Clinic. So he leaves, and her mother goes to my wife and says, where's my son? My wife says, he's at the clinic. He'll be back at 5:30. 10 minutes later, where's my son? Okay. He's at the Cleveland Clinic. He'll be back at 5:30. And caregivers, this is like one of the number one stressors, is repetitive questioning. And my wife, Montessori teacher for more than 20 years, preschool to kindergarten, then wrote down on a piece of paper, your son is at the Cleveland Clinic, he'll be back at 5:30. Showed it to her mother, made sure her mother could read it. Her mother could. Takes this note, tapes it to the countertop in the kitchen. Next time her mother asks, she says, there's a message about that. We should check it out. And they walk to this location, just like people learn the location of where they sit for lunch. Right. She points to the message and says, what does this say? Doesn't read it for her. Everything you do for me. The mother reads it. It says, that's right. Whenever you want to know about Chris, your son, we'll come here. And how do we know the message that we store externally is the right message? If it works, they tell us. Does it reduce their anxiety? Does it give them what they need? Their anxiety is reduced. An hour later, where's my son? To learn a procedure, which people with dementia can do, you practice it in the same way. So they walk again to this place. After 3 repetitions, for the rest of the time she stayed with us, when her anxiety would rise, her feet would carry her to this location. Just like people's feet carry them to the chair for lunch. Her eyes would look, the habit of reading would kick in. The content is there, she can read it. It reduces her anxiety. Anxiety reduction becomes associated with this procedure, this place. And my wife's out of the loop. But most importantly, my wife enabled her mother to reduce her own anxiety, which then frees her to be able to do other things, to be engaged in other activities. And the cost, a piece of paper, but a different way of thinking.
Right.
So the Montessori approach is a very different way of thinking. It's about how to enable people to recover function, to learn new things, to create environments that support a person's capabilities. And we emphasize that a person with dementia is a normal person who has cognitive disabilities. There but for the grace of God. That's us in the future. And so the good news is, if you have a supportive environment, what you see is a process Maria Montessori called normalization. When a person is confident, when they can succeed, when they have purposeful activity, meaningful roles for a family or a community, that's when all of us feel at our best. We work with places, we create what's called a Montessori inspired lifestyle in different communities for memory care. And in a lot of these communities, they have social concerns committees. And they want to help people who are, and I quote, less fortunate than we are. So they make meals or toiletry bags for people in homeless shelters. And for an outing, they take these there. That's a very different kind of outing than getting in a van and looking at the fall leaves. Yeah. But when you're doing these things, you're at your best. and you feel a sense of self-worth and meaning. And so, I remember in South Carolina, there was a group, continuing care retirement community, people, independent, assisted living, memory care. And they would come together as a group and make chef salads for people in a homeless shelter nearby, because they said, we never get enough greens. And a man with advanced dementia was there. He was taking the stem off of the spinach leaves. That was his contribution. Everyone was able to contribute in their own way. And so it's about a way of working with persons with dementia, but it's also a way of living. We have a Montessori-inspired lifestyle pledge that we invite people to take. In residential settings, the first line is, I will work to create the place where I would want to live. And then it's like, I will remember that I'm a visitor in the home of my residents, and I will act like a good visitor, rather than a bad guest. We've all had bad guests on occasion in our house. They control the TV, the music, what we eat. I will remember I must earn the trust of my residents. They must learn to trust me. I will use Montessori principles in everything I do. I will treat people the way I would wish to be treated. So as you see, it's not just about activities. It's about a way of interacting with people. And what's nice is when people go home, they start using it there. I remember I was talking with the vice president of a big distribution company for senior products. And he said, I began to believe in you when I went home and I had my two sons, and I've always yelling at them to do these chores around the house. And then I asked them, which of these chores do each of you want to do?
So it could be used in any situation, right?
When they got to choose the chores, it's a miracle. They were able to do it. Yeah.
So just a comment, all right? And then we're going to take a real quick break, and I want to talk more about the future and your training and all of that of this program. But I think there's a perception out there, I believe, that people with various forms of dementia, like Alzheimer's, that they maybe cannot learn. But everything that you're saying, that they absolutely can learn new things, right?
Oh, yes. This is not even a question anymore. We're talking decades worth of research.
Yes.
And so, what I say is, people who say they're experts, or organizations that say they're experts that tell you that people with dementia cannot learn, are either ignorant of decades worth of research, or they're not.
Right. All right. Well, good. So we're going to take a real quick break. I promise when we get back, I'm going to share, I'll give you the opportunity to share with our listeners how they can learn more about your organization and what you're doing. And we'll talk about kind of what the future plan is here. So, so do you know anybody who may be concerned about an older driver? Well, Senior Care Authority's Beyond Driving with Dignity program is a facilitated self-assessment program for older drivers. This program has been designed to serve as a vital tool to facilitate older drivers and their families as they make the appropriate decisions regarding the future of one's safe driving career. If the individual is a safe driver, an advisor will provide him or her with strategies on how to remain a safe driver as they progress through the aging process. If driving retirement is the appropriate decision, then the individual and their family are offered possible alternatives, resources, and a specific plan to ensure a smooth and successful transition from the driver's seat to the passenger seat. So to learn more, you could go to the website, beyonddrivingwithdignity.com, or call 877-907-8841 to connect with a Senior Care Authority advisor in your area. We're back with Dr. Cameron Camp, who's just has a tremendous background in dealing with dementia, memory care, and has developed a kind of a Montessori approach to dementia care. So again, thank you for joining us. And maybe you could just share with our listeners a little bit more, just how they can learn more about your organization, all the wonderful things that you're doing.
Sure. So, a good place to start is our website, which is, www. And then the letters CEN, the number 4, and then ARD. So www.cen, the number 4ard.com. And that's for Center for Applied Research in Dementia, which is our center. We have lots of resources, especially for family caregivers. Many of them are free. We also have a book that I developed over many years called Hiding the Stranger in the Mirror. And that's been translated into a number of languages. It's also available as an Audible book, so relatively inexpensive. But it teaches us to ask the question, when we see a person with dementia doing something, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why are they doing it? So its subtitle is a detective manual, for understanding the behavior of people with dementia. So when we ask the question, why is this happening? The answer can never be because they have dementia. Why is this happening? Because they have dementia. How do we know they have dementia? Because this is happening. It's circular reasoning, and it doesn't help anybody. I was in a locked special care unit years ago, and I said, give me your biggest problem. If I can't help you with that, with your biggest stressor, why should you even listen to me? That always gets people's attention. It's a fair question. But they threw me a curve. They said, we don't have any problems. I said, this is a locked special care advanced dementia. Yeah, but we don't have any problems. So I said, well, yeah, people are standing at the door waiting to escape as soon as the door opens. Yeah, we got that. Do you have people who are going to other people's rooms and a fight breaks out? Yeah, we got that. And, I went down the list. They had everything. But then they said, but we don't have any problems. That's just what dementia is.
Right.
Learned helplessness on a system-wide scale. Why is this happening? Because they have dementia, see? So what we try to do is to break the wheel, to break that, way of thinking. And so, we have a formula, in the book, basically. You look for a physical cause first. You look for level of stimulation. Are they understimulated? Are they overstimulated? And whose problem is it? So, for instance, I was working with a woman who was taking care of her husband who had Alzheimer's at home. And she said, here's my problem. When the grandchildren come over, he can't remember their names. And then he gets upset. We all get upset. And I said, well, what if your grandchildren wore name tags so that he could just read their names? And then you wouldn't have that problem. And she goes, yeah, but that's cheating. So sometimes the intervention to help involves educating family members, legislators. Okay.
Yeah,
sometimes
especially.
Sometimes that's where the intervention needs to be. And then we look for, is there anything in the physical environment that needs to change? There's, I was talking with a woman who was taking care of her husband at home, and he had early onset dementia. And she said, I keep putting up notes, don't do this, don't do this. He keeps trying to help. I keep trying to head him off. And then yesterday he went around the neighborhood, collected all the newspapers and brought them home. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And I said, well, maybe if you gave him like some things that he can do, some messages saying, would you help me with this? You're asking him to figure out what to do. And he's the person with dementia.
Right. So, you've brought up there, through this conversation, some examples of individual people you've worked with, everywhere from an individual family caregiver all the way up to a CCRC, continuing care retirement community. So maybe you could just talk about who's your target for, training purposes, because that that range I just said is a huge range, right? So let's talk about that and kind of what your hope is in everything that you're doing, and kind of that who that target is.
Yes. Well, we actually have a number of targets. We do a lot of work with corporations, both for-profit and not-for-profit. We train staff how to implement these principles. And then we also have like a train the trainer model, because you can't train everybody. And you want these approaches to be sustained. So we credential communities at 3 levels: bronze, silver, and gold. And that involves being able to have internal trainers who can bring on new staff in these approaches. They can sustain the interventions that we develop. So we work with corporations. We also have some individualized training that is available. As I speak, we have a grant that we're working on where we're creating 1 or 2 minute mini videos designed specifically for family members in the in-home setting, because they don't have a lot of time to go to a 6-hour seminar or whatever. So those are going to be coming online very soon as for the general public as our grant finishes this fall. We also train home health organizations so that they can train their staff as well. So we're really interested in this continuum of care, because this is a different approach that we're talking about here. And this is what needs to become like the standard. And I hear this, all the time from people who start implementing it. This is, people know in their heart this is the right way, that there has to be a different approach than, give them the medication. If that doesn't work, give them a higher dose. If that doesn't work, we've tried everything. This is different. It's also more effective. When you implement these approaches, you see reductions in the use of psychotropic medication. When people are engaged during the day, they sleep at night, and you don't need the sleeping pills. You see less agitation. You see more satisfaction, families, and as well as the staff and residents. You see reductions in staff turnover in residential settings, which is critically important these days. So, you can have your cake and eat it too. It just requires a very different approach. There are different models. There's like a hospital model. There's a hotel model. And no one wants to live in a hospital. But people don't live in hotels either. You stay in a hotel until you can go home. And the building may be beautiful, but you have people who are at the door saying, I want to go home. And you can try to redirect them, but that's just a Band-Aid over an open wound. The key is to make the place where they live feel like a home. So what does a person with dementia want? They want what a person without dementia wants. They want to live in a home where they have their stuff. They want to know their neighbors. They want their neighbors to know them. And we're very big on the use of name tags for residents to call each other by name. That is a big thing when someone calls you by name, and to call staff by name.
Right.
You want to feel like you're part of a community where you have community goals and events and things to look forward to, and socials that you're putting on for your family, and social concerns, and where you have control over where you're going to go for outings. So we're very big on committees. And then you want to be connected to the outside world. And when people live in a place that provides that, it's a very different place. It's the kind of place where I want to live, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Well, this has just been enlightening. As I say, I could talk to you for hours. This has been great, and hopefully you'll come back on the show at a future date. But everybody check it out. Website is www.CEN4ARD.com. Dr. Cameron Camp, thank you so much for joining us on Boomers Today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Frank.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us. please be safe. And we will talk to everybody next week. Thank you.
You've been listening to Boomers Today with Frank Sampson. To learn more about today's show, visit boomerstodayradio.com and join us next time for another edition of Boomers Today.